So today is the first of two AMAs on the next prioritization working group. And thank you for coming today. Why don't I turn it over to Bronwyn for the first question. Bronwyn, can you verbalize?
Oh, sure. Okay, so as a fairly new team member, there's been a challenge that I've identified in terms of figuring out who the correct engineering team is for a specific need that another non-engineering team may need. And I have this challenge currently. I'm wondering if this effort will bring a little bit of efficiency and potentially remove that kind of challenge for non-engineers at GitLab who need to get a project on the engineering work allocation list.
Yeah, I'll take the first shot at answering. Is that I don't think this directly, it's a really important thing. I don't think it directly helps with this. What I do as an engineering director, and I see the engineering managers and product managers that I work with, that are on my teams that I work with, is post to Slack channels. Like, I need help. I need advice on X. Might be in the product channel, might be in the hashtag development channel, etc., to find the right teams. There's probably better ways of doing that, but that's what I notice happening. But what does everybody else think?
So I have the same problem, right? Despite my role, we're a large, complex organization. So what I usually do is go to our product categories page, and that's got. I'll share my screen. This has got a. It's basically the topology of our product, and we tend to run our org mirroring our product, so they're pretty close. So if you kind of know your keyword, or if you want to scan this navigation and find kind of like what might be the name for the thing you're trying to do. You can pretty easily get into, like, let's just click on plan stage. And then you've got a list of names you can reach out to. And then I think the process that Wayne described kind of starts where, you're reaching out to Gabe. Hey, I've got this thing. It looks like it lands in your group. Can you verify for me? And he's like, yes. Or he's like, no, it's actually my peer, Melissa. Talk to her. And then in just 2 hops, you've made it to the person you need to find in a 700 or 800 person org, which isn't that bad from a effort perspective. Once you have a project and it's on the backlog and it's captured kind of in this format, the label taxonomy that we're talking about here, I think you are going to get a lot more transparency into what the status of your work is, who's doing it, when it's going to arrive, those sorts of things. And so I agree with Wayne, not necessarily helping with that initial navigation point, but there will be some benefits that will help stakeholders quite a bit.
Eric, can you leave that page up for one quick second? I just want to add that for folks who absolutely have no idea which group might own a feature, I linked another page where you can actually search for the feature, identify the group, and then come to this page that Eric is showing, and then identify the product manager for that group, and then you can mention them either on an issue or in a group channel.
And that's Amanda's link is right here, category features.
Thanks to both of you for handbook first. Look in the handbook first, and if you can't find it there, then go to Slack. That's the better way to go than what I recommended. Lyle, do you want to verbalize number 2?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I was just wondering, I saw in the CEO channel yesterday a post about this customer issue prioritization working group, and then I was confused. And so I'm just wondering if you could help me understand sort of the distinctives between this next prioritization working group and this customer issue prioritization working group.
Okay, I'm the facilitator for the next prioritization working group, and I actually am not familiar yet with this other working group, but thanks for the heads up. I will review soon, but anybody who is familiar with the customer issue prioritization work group or both working groups, that'd be great if they have any thoughts on this. So it sounds like no. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I'm just scanning the page, and it looks like they're working on a kind of rigorous framework for prioritizing issues kind of within that feature bucket. I think that would be compatible with what we're doing here. I mean, at the end of the day, that's, you're either relying solely on the discretion of a DRI, or you've got some kind of formulaic thing like the RICE framework or something like that, where you're scoring features and kind of weighting each category and totaling them up and making a decision that way or a recommendation that way. So I think based on the business goals in the description, that would just plug right in as one way to prioritize the things within a given category that we've got. So we've got features and then subcategories within features if they want to use this framework to determine, okay, we've got two things in the same category in the cross-functional prioritization framework. They've got the same severity and priority. Which do I do first? I think this looks like the output of this would help make that decision more accurately and consistently across the org. That's my guess.
It's worth noting too, it looks like that other working group actually completed a year ago, a little over a year ago. So it's not an active working group right now.
That's an even better answer than my answer. If the case
that is a better answer, but there's literally an update in the CEO channel yesterday, and so
maybe I need to update that page because it clearly states the target end date was April 1st of last year, and I'm looking, and there are people that are no longer at the company that are involved in it, and titles are way out of date.
All right.
Was that update between Stella and Sid, Lyle? I think I saw that.
No, it's Sophie and Sid. I can. Let me just pop it in the doc. So even more confused. But I definitely like the idea that it already ended.
I don't think it's ended, and I think Gabe is leading the effort. It is still active, and it is something that Gabe is working on. He's actively recruiting groups into piloting bits and pieces of this. So I don't think he's here on the call, but it is still an ongoing effort.
Well, maybe Wayne, you can just kind of talk to Dave and try to figure out what the intersection is. We have had the conversation here of like, hey, when we populate our taxonomy and we populate priority and severity, and two things are equal, which does the DRI prioritize? This may be like I said, an answer to that. But if it's still active, try to see if you can figure that out.
Will do. It looks like you have number 3.
Yeah, I noticed on slide 12 that code review was listed as a pilot group, which as the PM of code review was news to me. And so I felt like I was curious how you're measuring success or impact of whatever of this working group, given that we haven't changed or done anything different in our planning to sort of like account or deal with this. And so I'm not sure that I guess the impact you expect to be having is happening as a result of this, or just like what the group naturally does.
Yeah, I can take that one. I reached out to the two engineering managers for those two groups. So we've been piloting the charts and making sure that the team has reduced the ratio of their undefined merge requests to 0, and making the team aware of the types that they ship and if they're classifying it correctly or not. And we've learned a lot from that. We didn't pilot the new prioritization scheme yet because that hasn't been fully automated. That's still in the works of the working group. So that I don't think we piloted the mechanism that we involve product in prioritization yet, because that's still being discussed in the working group.
Yeah, and various working group members, including I see Matt, and I think I saw Neil as well, are working on, and also others in quality and UX, are working on updating the handbook pages, doing proposed MRs on how we're going to update our processes, not just the dashboards, which are extremely important, but also how the prioritization will occur, what kind of ceremonies we'll have, like meetings, and issues and other things to track those. So that has not happened yet, but that is coming. Matt and Neil, anything to? I know you just started working on that, but anything to share on that? Matt Wilson and Neil McCarson.
Yeah, so like Wayne said, it's figuring out, determining what those additional ceremonies might look like, especially that data evaluation. We're now trying to trend toward certain ratios of work types. Who's involved in those conversations? What's that cadence? And what are those expected outcomes is where the discussions are currently.
Would it be maybe fair to say, if like I was looking at the data, So for teams that have not changed the way they're prioritizing, which sounds like both of the teams in the pilot, they're fairly in line with what your expected ratios are of groups. And so maybe like there doesn't need to be a ceremony or framework or other things. Like if the groups are sort of naturally trending around the work types that you're looking for.
Well, it depends upon the backlog too, right? We haven't looked at all. Have we burned down all the backlog or not? And do we have guardrails to ensure that we're going into a healthy ratio going forward? I think it's great that we're trending that way, but going forward, we want to explore having well-defined healthy ratios with clear DRIs to prioritize, especially the bugs, maintenance, making sure that we have a space to schedule them and not having to accumulate the amount of backlog of maintenance is key going forward. So guardrails for us not to go back to the previous state.
I would say, Kai, too, like nobody's reviewed the result of a pilot with me, so I wouldn't say it's done yet. When we do a pilot, though, we typically start with the teams that are best set up for success with the pilot. So you exit the pilot with a positive example that you can then bring to future teams as you expand the pilot, as you roll something out. So I'd expect little change. If we started a pilot with a team that's like the furthest away from it, it would be that much more difficult to imprint something. But part of what we're trying to achieve here is consistency across the org. So there will be some teams that were, especially like under David's guidance, they're making a lot of really good decisions for reliability and security, even going back a year or more, right? But we know that wasn't happening across the whole org. So we're going to implement this for consistency. For some teams, it's going to be a relatively small change, but I think they're going to get substantially better transparency and visibility into what they're doing. But that same framework for other teams, I think, is going to be a radical change in what was happening. And it's important to get that evenly across, the 50 or so teams and PMs and EMs that we've got.
Kai, it looks like you've got number 4 as well.
Yeah, I think number 4, and it sort of leads into Eric, what you've just said. And I think, like, how is the group thinking about like trade-offs of various types of work within like the defined percentages? I think there are some groups that might be in like a more greenfield state where they're building lots of feature work because they're newer, or they don't have a backlog of 5 years of tech debt and things like some of our more mature areas. And so like, how are we thinking about like letting groups go out of band of the defined percentages? Are you looking for like quarters of trends or 6 months of trends? Or is it sort of like, if you go out of it 1 month, there's going to be conversations and like engineering allocations come back into play? Like, how are we thinking about sort of what you're trying to see within those bands?
Short answer, yes. There's going to be teams that have like not the sort of baseline proportions. I think that's something that we can sketch in now. Like Italy is going to be different. There's other green teams that are brand new and don't have tech debt, therefore they should be burning less of it down. And that'll reveal itself, I think, pretty quickly. So my hope is that there isn't like month-to-month negotiation between EMs and PMs about these proportions. Maybe upfront there is, because that's kind of like the burn-in period, but on a go-forward basis, it's kind of like, we're going to rely on a lot on the discretion that PMs and EMs have, and especially their relationship with each other, to make the right recommendations. So like, hey, David and Eric, like we think our group needs to be 50-50 or 40-30 30 or something like that. And we're apt to take those recommendations, especially if we see that we're looking at the same dashboard together in that conversation, and velocity is high, quality is good, error budgets are green. Those teams are going to be licensed to go faster, but it's not going to be an anecdotal, opinion-based conversation. It'll be more empirical than has been in the past.
Dan, looks like you have number 5.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Hey, everyone. Thanks for the AMA. Just calling out the master prioritization list, which is linked, included in both engineering and product handbook pages. seems to be it lags a little bit behind some of what we're doing. Maybe this is some process change that we need to make. An example of that is using sharding blocker as opposed to CID composition, and that being on there for a good amount of time after that label was changed. Another example is the security versus bug vulnerability. I created an MR to remove that security label just because, based on reading the AppSec team's handbook page, it seemed like the severity was only going to be added in the case where something was a bug vulnerability. And I had conversations with other team members that had this perspective, and I wanted to represent that in the MR. The question I had was whether I should just close this in behalf of, waiting for the working group to finish whatever outcomes are going to come from the working group, or or just to raise the visibility of that MR, looking for some reviews and feedback. And Wayne, you have a comment?
I would say collaborate with Matt Wilson, who, thank you, Matt, for volunteering to be the DRI and updating the product management portion of the handbook for needed to update our processes, et cetera, as a result of the working group. So updating the master prioritization list will be one of the handbook pages that will need to be changed. But Matt, anything to add to this, or not any comments as of yet?
No comments on that yet. I'm not sure about the MR on the changing of the labels, but I think that's definitely something we need to make sure we're taking a look at, because one of the goals of the group should be updating in a consistent way across all of the different pages: engineering, UX, quality, PM.
Yeah, I think just for context here, if you click through on the link for security fixes, it goes to the security team handbook page, which sort of says it's only for bug vulnerability. So just when we're trying to prioritize some of these really important aspects of work, it just adds a bunch of confusion, which is why I added it. So Matt, I'm happy to work with you. Thank you very much. Chad needs someone to verbalize. Or is your...
I got it.
Oh, you got it? Sweet.
Headset died. Thanks. And Eric is familiar with this one. I bug him about this one periodically. Now that we're becoming more disciplined about this breakdown, I'd also like to see us become more disciplined about net technical debt. And when we had this discussion, Eric pointed out we have this burn down chart of the debt that we're burning down, and we're making a lot of good progress there. But to me, that's like an iceberg. Like the debt that we know about and we have labeled and we have prioritized is like the tip of the iceberg. There's a vast amount of debt that exists that isn't necessarily captured or isn't captured and labeled in the right way to show up as being prioritized, or that we're not even aware of. And not all of that should be paid off. On an app this size, you can never pay down all of the technical debt, and you shouldn't. It would be a misallocation, which is the whole point of this effort. So I'd like to see us become more disciplined about how we prioritize that. And in the industry, I've never really seen very, very few methodical things about this. This one article from this game company is the only one I've ever seen that's sort of metrics driven about it. But it's not really applicable to us, and it misses a lot of things. One of the big things it misses, I think, is like retention. If you don't let good and great engineers like fix things that really bug them, not necessarily the shiny thing that they isn't really important, but something that really degrades their daily experience and the daily experience or impacts their productivity, they're not going to be happy. And there's lots of other things, security things, how likely is it to get us on the front page of Hacker News, even though it may not be getting attention otherwise metric. Love to know some thoughts on that, and also, see us become more disciplined, become, maybe an industry leader in this area in the way that we are with our discipline around lots of other things. Hope you could hear that.
Yeah, you're coming through fine. So yeah, for the benefit of this group, Chad's sort of referencing a conversation we had in my office hours last week, and the particular topic there was around observability. So I think Robert Marshall took a action item to update our definition of done to add a stronger concept of observability there. We talked about ways to capture observability debt, and then how we might prioritize that. And we referenced the master prioritization list that's up in item number 5 in Dan's item. Wayne referenced that and hyperlinked it. That's one way to sort of break ties. Let's say, you've got 2 P1 issues, and one is observability and one is data loss prevention. You pick the data loss prevention one, but yeah, there's other ways as well, like this other working group that Lyle brought our attention to might have a different way to sort of categorize that information. But yeah, I think that's very much in part the intent of this is having engineering be the DRI for a small subsegment of what we're prioritizing is meant to, in part, to kind of empower engineers, because I think what you said is true. Allowing great engineers to just fix the things that they see in their passion is an important part of every product development company and every great engineering organization. I think it's even more so at a company that creates a product for developers, right? And has put such an impetus on dogfooding. But it's still, DRI doesn't mean making unilateral decisions, right? So one of the things we want to keep out about the old model is this idea of influence, that, this doesn't take away the need or desire for engineers to kind of advocate to their PMs of like what features they're prioritizing. And it also means that PMs can and should be applying pressure to what engineers get to prioritize under the maintenance banner as well, because they're smart, they know the product well, they know the customer well. And we've got a lot of PMs that are former engineers, right? So they're more than knowledgeable about this stuff as well. So that's why I said earlier, we're going to rely a lot on, despite all the metrics, like this is an attempt to overly mechanize everything. It's just meant to make more informed decisions, and we're still going to continue to rely on the individual recognizance of those EMs and PMs, and again their relationship to kind of broker these sorts of things. So like where we left in the last working group, I think was like, well, who gets to decide? Who's the DRI? And I think what Dave and I landed on was having an escalation path, but not really having a DRI. So one is over the other, like really hoping that those dyads can broker those compromises and escalate only in the case where they really can't. And I think having like the group product manager and an engineering director or something like that would have to sort of hammer that out. But obviously that would be ideally a rare sort of case. We'll see how that works. But I think that'll be preferable to the old model, because we'd say, hey, this topic under under this terminology would be maintenance. It's going poorly. Why is that? And then the PM would say, well, the engineers should have provided me that data or advocated for it. Then the engineers would say like, well, I just kind of got used to my stuff not getting heard, right? So there's something about the way we had arranged incentives that meant some of these topics just didn't get prioritized. And again, it relied on that kind of influence model, but there wasn't enough kind of shared ownership to get the results we're looking for. So this is an attempt to kind of do a better job of arranging the incentives, so we strike that balance. And it means engineering is going to be, the buck is going to stop with us for a set of categories. And so if those things aren't going well, it's probably going to come down to the decisions we're making of did we do that piece of observability that Chad wanted, or should we have done a security issue or something like that? That's going to become a component of our performance. But I think we need to have that skin in the game. That's important, and this proposal is meant to capture that.
So, thanks for that response. Yeah, people should be involved, but my fear is that, like I said on the second line, without clearly defined metrics, often those just become debates that can have no clear winner and come out with bad feelings because they're politically or emotionally driven without metrics. And oftentimes engineering managers, or maybe the person that's got escalated to, or the product manager, won't have the technical depth or expertise to understand the implications of what's being said. And so as we have, clearly defined metrics around, the thousands of pages of other things we do in our handbook, it seems kind of dangerous for us to say, yeah, well, this is a really important thing, but we're just going to rely on people to work it out.
Well, I think, to start, yeah, we have to rely on people. One of the decisions we need to make is like our systems need to have sufficient observability. And once we have that, we've got the data that you're talking about to make those decisions. So I think we have to make that kind of like smart people driven decision up front as an investment. And then it will be a more data-driven decision going forward for those types of topics. So that could take the form of just a dump of raw events, giving us a sense of like how much is going on and how much do we know about it. Or we could say, okay, this team's going to take a week and just kind of like survey their whole system and create issues for things they think have poor observability and build that backlog. And then that might be one of the panes on this single pane of glass, this dashboard we provide of like, here's your observability debt. And if it's this big giant mountain and you're blowing your ER budget and your time to resolve incidents is super high, that's at least circumstantial evidence, if not direct data, that says, you need to make investments in observability in this area. So I think we'll be able to assemble it with a combination of the data we've got, our smart instincts, and building these backlogs that like you're saying don't necessarily exist today.
All right, thanks, Eric.
So I know we're at scheduled time, but some may have a little more time. So Dan, why don't we make your the last item in the agenda, the last one we covered today?
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, just with the focus on observability, which I'm totally in favor, I'm just wondering if we're planning on or thinking about investing more heavily in APM, application performance management tooling. I know tooling like Datadog and that type of thing can be hugely impactful in terms of engineers and their ability to deploy and understand their impact on the systems. It feels like something that we have a bit of a gap in, and it's there's been a long running gap from my perspective. So just wondering if there are any thoughts on that. I realize it's perhaps a little off topic. Apologies for that.
Topic has not come up before in discussions I've been in, but it sounds like a great idea. Mech, do you think your team might be interested in looking into this further with discussing this further with Dan?
Sure. Let's just have an issue up and do async.
Well, one of the things that comes to my mind is, anytime you have this taxonomy, whether it's just at the high level, bugs, features, maintenance, you implement it, there's always this discussion about like, what's a bug, what's a feature, what's maintenance. And, we're going to have those discussions. One like this is interesting in particular because it's arguably kind of like a roadmap item. So when we're doing that work, if it's dog fooding, is it feature? Is it maintenance? If there's two budget holders, which budget does it come out with? I mean, these are going to be kind of like interesting, I'll say medium stakes issues for us to figure out.
Great AMA session today. Thank you everyone who came. We're going to do another one later today to make sure that people in APAC who want to be a part of one have an opportunity to do so at a time when they're working. So thanks everyone. Have a great day.